Um, so welcome to Chai Chats. If you've never been to a Chai Chat before, it's just a conversation with usually an invited guest, and we just get real. And if you don't want to be a part of the conversation, if you don't want to be recorded, or you could just, sit back and listen and turn off your camera and your microphone if you want to. There's no stress to participate if you don't want to. But with that being said, I think I'm going to pass it off, and we're going to do some introductions. Again, if you don't want to say your name, you don't want to be a part of it, you don't have to. But yeah.
Also, just as a note, if you have any questions and for any reason you can't or don't want to use your microphone, feel free to put them in the chat or send them to any of the hosts if you want to keep them anonymous. So today we're having a discussion about food insecurity with Dr. Mariana Chilton. I hope I got that right. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Hi, and thank you for having me. Is it now my Zoom?
Yeah, ball's in your court.
Fantastico. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's nice to see you all. I'm Mariana Chilton. I'm a professor at the School of Public Health. I've been at Drexel since 2000, so over 20 years, almost 21 years. And I'm delighted to be here today, just have a conversation, and I'm really glad it's a small group because that means we can really get into it. So thank you all for having me, and I'm glad to be a part of this Chai Chat, not Chat Chai, right? Okay. Before we get started, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves and let's see, name your favorite food. We're also live streaming this on Facebook. And if you're not comfortable, you can just turn off your camera and say skip or something like that. But please let us know who you are and your favorite food, and then I'll get into it. And I see some friendly faces, and I see a very, very dear friend, Barbie Izquierdo. And so Barbie, are you willing to introduce yourself and join in on the conversation?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I am Barbie Izquierdo. I met Dr. Mariana Chilton through an amazing opportunity that changed my life. I don't want to take up too much of the time because it's not about me, but she definitely started my advocacy. I guess I can say at this point, career. And fighting for food justice issues. So I've been doing this for about 13 years now. I've worked for the Coalition Against Hunger, the Food Trust, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and I am now at Hunger Free America. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. I haven't heard you speak in a long time, and I was like, I can't miss this.
Awesome, Barbie. I'm so glad to hear you're at Hunger Free America. You want to choose somebody else in the circle to introduce themselves? And just before we keep going around, I'm going to put a link in the chat for how you all can get to know Barbie Izquierdo a little bit more. She's featured in a feature-length film called Place at the Table. She's also was a member of Witnesses to Hunger, which is an old project that we used to do together. Making good trouble. All right, Barbie, you choose somebody else in the circle.
Absolutely, thank you. I choose Kylie.
Hi, I'm Kylie. A first-year MPH student, and my favorite food is peanut butter. I hope I'm not missing anything else I'm supposed to say, but if you guys share my love for peanut butter, feel free to talk to me about it. I'll put it on anything, so yeah.
Choose somebody else in the circle to keep it going.
I'll choose Rowan, even though we already know who you are.
I'm Rowan. I'm a third year at Drexel studying legal studies and political science. I'm a part of the Chai Chats team, and what was it? My favorite food, right? Let's see. I actually just started going vegan for about 4 months, so I'm still getting used to favorite foods now. My favorite food used to be ravioli, so I'm gonna stick with that since I don't have like a top favorite food right now, but vegan ravioli. Oh, and I'll pick, is it Kaisa?
It's Kasha.
Kasha? Okay, go
Yes,
ahead.
it's a tough day. Hi, I'm Kasha. I'm a first year MPH student. Did I say that right? MPH. Yep, I'm an HMP student as well. I work with Mariana at the Center for Hunger-Free Communities, and my favorite food is potatoes because they're super versatile.
Choose somebody else in the circle.
Oh yeah. Um,
And if you want to skip, that's fine. If somebody else wants to skip, that's fine. Go ahead.
all right, Zach.
Hey y'all, I'm Zach. I'm a 5th-year global studies major with a concentration in justice and human rights. I'm also part of the Chai Chats team. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns, and I don't know what my favorite food is. It really depends on the day and like what I want. Maybe I've got a family recipe for these like lemon cookies that we only get during like the winter holidays because we only make them then. So maybe those. I'm gonna pass to Adriana.
Hey yo, I'm Adriana. I'm a 5th-year economics major. My favorite food is, I have many, but I'll say for now avocados because I really like them. Yes. And next it'll be Joanna.
Hi guys, there's like dinner being made in the back, so I don't have my camera on, but I'm Joanna. I'm a first year MPH student, also HMP. And I'm like Zach, it depends on the day, but I feel like you can't go wrong with a good bagel. Is there anyone else who hasn't gone? Oh, Maurice?
Yes. I thought I was gonna get forgotten. You know, I'm very forgettable in this.
No, you're not.
I'm Maurice Common. I'm the director for the Student Center for Diversity and Inclusion here at Drexel, and I'm gonna be that person, and I have to give it a 3-way tie. I'm a potatoes, peanut butter, and ice cream kind of a person, and if I can get all 3 in one day, then it's a great day.
That's fabulous. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. It means a lot to me that you're here and that you're engaged and willing to share. I'm going to give you a little link to a Google Doc. I hope it works out. And in that, I put in a link to A Place at the Table, which is the film in which Barbie shows up. But if you all have resources as we're talking that you want to share, please do share them in the chat. I just created a Google Doc that has some links and some ideas and also my notes for what I'm going to talk about today. So I thought I would talk for about like 10 minutes and then we can open it up for discussion. And I want you all to know that all questions are welcome, insights, corrections, edits, etc. No question is too basic or too deep. I've been at this for a little while, and I've learned from the best. I've learned from Barbie Izquierdo, and I've learned from a lot of Latina and Black women in Philadelphia and around the country. And I also used to work with American Indians. And any kind of insight or knowledge that I might be sharing with you today really comes from Black, Indigenous, Brown, people of color who have taught me about the experiences of hunger and food insecurity and about justice and about really life, good life lessons as well. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from what's known as Narberth, Pennsylvania, and originally the land of the Lenni Lenape nation, and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and those emerging in the future. and acknowledge that this land was, there are some treaties that are still quite relevant and have been violated multiple times for many generations, and this land was stolen, and we should give it back. And I am completely committed to ensuring, to finding ways to decolonize this land and to ensure that the proper stewards and caregivers of the land are respected and can do with the land as they please. So I think it's important to recognize that. Okay. So this is about food insecurity. I think I may have been invited because it might be November. And people are always thinking about how we can give away more turkeys. They start thinking about hunger. And we should be thinking about food insecurity and hunger all the time. There are seasons of hunger and food insecurity, but we've got to pay attention to it all the time. And hunger does not have to be. Hunger is man-made. It doesn't happen naturally. We have a natural urge and desire in our own bodies. We all know what it means to be hungry, right? Hungry for food, hungry for our favorite food. And yes, I am a peanut butter fan, and potatoes, and potato chips, particularly Cape Cod potato chips. So I'm going to talk about food insecurity and the definition of food insecurity, why food insecurity is important for public health and for health. I'm going to talk about the causes of food insecurity, which may surprise you or may not surprise you, depending on who you are and what you've been exposed to. I'm going to talk about what is not the solution to food insecurity, and then I'll talk about 3 domains of solutions. And hopefully at the end of this little conversation we'll have together, the revolution will be reignited, because we need insurrection-like solutions, radical, revolutionary solutions to address hunger and food insecurity. And then we'll open it up for dialogue and discussion. And again, as I'm talking, please feel free to go on in the chat and share other ideas, okay? So food insecurity, the official definition of food insecurity is the lack of access to enough food for an active and healthy life. It has 2 components, according to the definition. The first one is enough. That's what most people think about hunger. Oh, hunger is terrible. People need more food. They don't have enough. The other component of food insecurity has to do with health. So it's enough food for an active and healthy life. So you could actually have food in your cupboards, but you could be quite actually food insecure, because that food that you have in your cupboards could be oodles of noodles, cans and cans of ravioli, plenty of food, but that is not the right kinds of food for an active and healthy life to be fully nourished. So that's the official brief version, and in the Google Doc that I shared with you, you can go on to the Economic Research Services USDA website and learn how it's measured, etc. And I can tell you more about how we have been measuring it in Philadelphia and around the country, if you're interested. Food insecurity is extremely important to think about, because food insecurity affects people across the lifespan, from times of being in utero, when we were inside our own mother's womb. If our mother was food insecure, then that actually affects our birth weight, it affects our health, our ability to grow and to be nourished throughout our lifetimes. And actually, in our research, we have found that when moms report food insecurity, that their children are more likely to be hospitalized and have developmental delay and those kinds of things. For infants and toddlers, food insecurity affects cognitive, social, and emotional development. They're more likely to be hospitalized, to be in poor health. It affects it affects them. And if you're not developing well as a young child, that development window starts to close down, and that can actually scar infants and young children for life. In other words, by scar, what I mean is that's actually a brain injury. And that affects a child's readiness for school. If a child is not ready for school, they're going to be behind their peers before they even cross the threshold of kindergarten, and things can actually tank from there. For kids who are school age, food insecurity is associated with more stomach aches, more headaches, being sick, inability to pay attention in school, can't get along with their peers, don't get along with their teachers. As they get older, more likely to drop out. And also as it's known that food insecurity, if a teenager is food insecure, doesn't have enough money for food, their household doesn't have enough money for food, they're more likely to think about suicide and attempt committing suicide. So that also introduces to you mental health issues, very deep mental health issues, and the relationship between mental health and food insecurity. We know that moms who are food insecure are 3 times more likely to be depressed than moms who are not food insecure. And if a mom is depressed, she's less likely to engage with her kids, more likely to get really frustrated, hard to get a job, hard to get up off the sofa, hard to focus, and it can really be quite damaging, not just for the mom and her on the job, but also her kid, because it affects the mother-child relationship, the family relationships. And then it's associated in adulthood with greater problems with diabetes and obesity, cardiovascular disease, et cetera. And it just goes round and round and round and round. It's intergenerational. So it affects the whole life course. So what's happening right now with COVID-19, it's not COVID that's causing the food insecurity crisis that we're having in this country. It is our country's response to addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. We do not have to have hunger in this country. We can have a pandemic and people not being hungry. And that has everything to do with how the government has responded to this, to how people have been expected to shelter in place, can't work. All you really need is to do universal basic income so that everybody has enough money for food and enough money for rent, etc. We'll talk more about that. Okay. Food insecurity has greatly increased since COVID-19. Before COVID-19 hit, I would have to say it was about 11 to 12% of the population was experiencing food insecurity and hunger, slightly better than in previous years. During the recession, what's often called the Great Recession in Philadelphia, food insecurity was affecting 50%, in other words, half of all families in Philadelphia. It has, and that we are still dealing with the consequences of that, because those kids who were struggling during that time and their parents who were struggling during that time are still very likely struggling, and maybe getting a little bit better, but still those scars, that imprint of hunger and food insecurity stays with you. It's like a shadow, it's like a ghost. As one woman in our research said to me, it's like a bird nesting in the head. That history and experience of food insecurity stays with you. Right now, there are various estimates right now, and in my little Google Doc, I put in the Pulse survey, which the census is trying to keep track of hardship and asking about families not being able to afford enough food in the past 7 days. And there's been a major increase in food insecurity pretty much all across the country. But as you can imagine, it is especially affecting Black and Indigenous people, immigrant people, people with disabilities, et cetera. And that is the pattern of food insecurity and hunger. It follows the fault lines of discrimination and racism and colonialism in our history. So food insecurity just falls right into the crevasses and the big problems that we have in our society that are rooted in our history of genocide, colonialism, enslavement, Jim Crow, etc., housing discrimination, etc. So let's get into the causes of food insecurity. Do not let anybody ever tell you that poverty is a root cause of food insecurity. People think they're getting all deep. Oh yeah, let's talk about root causes. Food insecurity has to do with poverty. Yeah, but that's not the root. Poverty doesn't have to exist either. Poverty is man-made. We create this through our social relationships. So if you think about who has the highest rates of food insecurity and hunger in the US, women, what's called female-headed households. So women who've got kids and don't have an extra, maybe a breadwinner, or they're actually the only breadwinner in the house. Indigenous people have the highest rates of food insecurity and hunger. The Navajo Nation at one point had food insecurity at 80%. Female-headed households, about 33%. White households, about 8 or 9%. All right, so it's also families of color. So Black and Latina families have rates of food insecurity and hunger that are 2 times that of white families. People who are LGBT, QI, etc., have extremely high rates, same rates as actually female-headed households. So why would that be? If you think about it, who has the highest rates of hunger are people who have been discriminated against and disenfranchised and marginalized in our society. So at the roots, again, are genocide, colonialism, racism, bigotry, homophobia, xenophobia, you name it, patriarchy, it's all there. Okay, and those are the roots. So if those are the roots, and you want to address food insecurity and hunger, you have to think way beyond food. Okay, so the solutions, what is not a solution to hunger? Might surprise you. Charity is not a solution. Charity oftentimes will tell you, oh, we need more food. But if I just told you what all the roots of food insecurity and hunger are, how is another can of ravioli is going to heal someone's food insecurity? Okay, it might help them in the moment, but is that enough for an active and healthy life? And I'd also have to say, is that going to help anybody's depression? And is that sustainable? Is that something that's going to help someone over time? Or does that just keep our our disordered, pathological social relationships in place? And that's what charity does. If you think about it, you have hunger heroes. Think about Phil Abundance. Look at their website. People who are hunger heroes, it's the people who are donating to the food pantries, and then they get celebrated. Ooh, gee, thanks to Dunkin' Donuts for their generosity. They're our hunger hero of the week, or so-and-so gave, this amount of money, or Domino's Sugar gave money to No Kid Hungry, and we're so grateful. They're our real hunger heroes. What it does is it buoys up the people who donate, who are powerful and who have all of the wealth, and it celebrates people who are wealthy to the disappearance and diminishing of people who are receivers. And I guarantee you, if you talk to people who go to food pantries, yeah, they may say on the surface that they're very grateful, but most people who have to land at the food pantries feel absolutely humiliated and devastated, denigrated, and less than. And I know this through my research. I didn't even get into the Center for Hunger-Free Communities and all of our work with Witnesses to Hunger and Children's Health Watch, but I can get into it later. So charity, all it does is it keeps the same social relationships at bay. And I put into the link a really beautiful video by Arundhati Roy, who has a beautiful, maybe like a 5-minute video about we need transformative solutions. We're going through a portal after this pandemic. Are we going to drag all of the rest of our disordered and, sort of terrible relationships through with us, or what are we going to do? And charity is nice, but charity, all it does is keep the oppression at play. All right, so there are basically 3 sets of solutions, 3 kinds. A lot of people, one of the alternatives to charity is solidarity. So mutual aid societies, people who use what's called the solidarity economy, cooperative types of solutions where no one is embarrassed to be a part of that. People are proud to be a part. How can you build a food pantry or a food cupboard that actually people are so happy and feel proud to be involved? Not just the giver, but the receiver should feel proud and nourished morally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically nourished through the food. So you can actually shift that through this concept of solidarity. How can you create like a mutual aid effort? And we can talk more about that. So there's that. It helps to heal relationships. And we have a program at our center called the Building Wealth and Health Network. There's a link to that in there too, We use a trauma-informed or a healing-centered approach to food insecurity and hunger, where we're helping people to have less social isolation. Oppression isolates you. If you are oppressed, you're very much isolated from family and community. So you can build healing relationships, address the underlying trauma and violence of hunger, because violence is at the root. Social violence, political violence, economic violence, policy violence. In the Building Wealth and Health Network, we were able to reduce the odds of food insecurity by 65%, and there was no food involved. What did we do? We helped people build a sense of connection, social relationships, and we put money in their bank accounts. Whatever they put into their bank account, we matched in terms of their savings. So financial power, and then we also did a lot of political education in there too. You can learn more about that. That's solidarity. That's one area of solutions. Another area of solutions tends to be the standard of those of us who work on food insecurity. We think about SNAP or food stamps, and WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, the big nutrition assistance programs, free school breakfast, free school lunch, after school meals, summer meals, Meals on Wheels for elders. So these are the huge efforts that the government does that affects millions of people at a time. School lunch, the USDA is basically feeding 30 million people a day during school, kids. So any change to school lunch can actually have huge impacts on kids. Same thing with SNAP benefits, etc. But if you think, and also other standard approaches are talking about increasing minimum wage, making sure that people have access to health care, mental health care, those kinds of things. Those are your standard approaches, and they used to be the kind of thing that I really focused on, and through our program Witnesses to Hunger, we were working really hard to protect SNAP benefits in WIC. Over the several years, though, I've become much more radicalized or rational because of my work with Black and Latina women in Philly and around the country, is that why do we have to be on food stamps? I remember when we got to know the members of our program Witnesses to Hunger, and maybe Barbie, if you want to talk about that, you can. But if not, no worries. It's kind of old news. This is so old. I was talking to somebody about that, you can be an advocate for yourself, speak up for yourself politically, get engaged in, helping to solve your issues and the things that you care about. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that, Mariana. What do you do? And I said, in response, well, I say food stamps are good medicine. You got to improve food stamps. And one of the members of my program, of this Witnesses to Hunger program, said, Mariana, that's terrible. How could you possibly be advocating for that? I don't want to be on food stamps. I want to get off of food stamps. I want to live a life where I do not need food stamps. Other folks have said to me things like welfare is like a chain. Welfare is a way to keep me down. And if you actually look at the underneath of our social services and public assistance programs, you see this, it's just maintaining our social relationships as they are without transforming our social and political relationships. So from my perspective, it's just a souped up version of what's called a charity model. We can talk more about that. The last set of solutions are more transformative solutions. If we know that colonialism and genocide, enslavement, and patriarchy, etc., are at the roots of food insecurity and hunger, then why are we not looking to give land back to indigenous peoples, to respect treaty rights, to promote indigenous sovereignty? Number one. Number two, reparations for the horrors and traumas done to Black people in this country for hundreds of years, longer than our country has been a country. Like, not longer, but like the majority of the time has been a history of enslavement. Reparations, not more food stamps, reparations. If we had more reparations, we wouldn't need food stamps. Let's see, I have a universal basic income. Why are we always so focused on SNAP? Why do people have to, people are on SNAP because most of the people who are on SNAP are actually working, or else they're disabled and can't work. So the people who are working, it tells you that their wages are not enough. So we should be focusing on wages. And by the way, why is a person only valuable if they're working? Why is it you can only get health care if you're working? So universal basic income should be replacing these kinds of social relationships where people don't have to work for the man at low wages, and maybe can actually do more creative things like take care of their kids, make a beautiful garden, share food with others, participate in the solidarity economy, those kinds of things. And finally, we need to think about food as a basic and fundamental human right. And it should be written into our Constitution. We need a new Constitution in this country. And there are other countries who have written the right to food into their own constitutions, and we can follow suit. We can learn from the rest of the world. There's more to say, but I think I'll stop there. And then we can really get into some discussions and disagreements.
I know I have something that I would like to just throw out there. Mariana, I was wondering if you could possibly touch on the impact of food deserts, specifically in inner city neighborhoods, and the concentration of unhealthy food options like fast food restaurants or corner stores, or like Chinese stores, like those types of things that you see very, 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 very constant in a lot of inner city neighborhoods, as opposed to actual access to healthier grocery store items that you see in more affluent neighborhoods?
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. I know Barbie has a lot to say about this, but before, maybe Barbie may not want to chime in, but and other people actually on the call may have more to say about this. But what I'd like to do is not question you, but just like raise a little question mark on the concept of food desert. It's actually food apartheid. Black communities especially, or disenfranchised communities and in rural areas, do not have access to good grocery stores, etc. And that's actually intentional. And it's rooted in a deep history of housing discrimination, neighborhood discrimination, disenfranchisement. It is actually very real and extremely problematic. People have to pay a lot more money to get to a good grocery store. They have to really travel, and a lot of people have to travel out of their neighborhoods. That means more money for them, more time, feeling potentially at risk for leaving their neighborhood, don't know who's going to be around, they're not really from there, don't know people around the neighborhood. So it's a very big problem, and it's something that people should be addressing through like cooperative grocery stores, et cetera, solidarity economy, those kinds of things. And also zoning issues are extremely important. Actually, if you're interested in zoning, you actually could be working on food insecurity and hunger, because it's the zoning that allows it to be a food swamp, if you want to use desert and swamp, where McDonald's, Popeyes, et cetera, you can see entire strips of fast food places and you can't get a good grocery store. There's plenty of food. That's the thing, plenty of food, but not the right kinds of food. But I'll be quiet because I think other people may have more things to say about that too.
I can start by just because it's what is happening right now in my neighborhood. Where I live in Philadelphia is one of those food swamps. I just moved here on October 1st, and then unfortunately, with the murder of Walter Wallace, this exact neighborhood has been looted. So all of the any type of stores, the fast food stores, all of that, they're all boarded up and closed. The Walmart was severely damaged and flooded, so we can't go to Walmart, we can't go to Target. The supermarket was looted as well. So not only like they have slowly began to recover, but because of how many people are now rushing to the supermarkets to get whatever they can, like I can't get anything. I've been ordering my food from Amazon. And I've never done that before. It's something completely new, having to wait. And then living in an urban neighborhood, you also have to worry about your packages being stolen. So, saying that just because it's my experience right now, which is very different from the experiences that I had growing up. I was born and raised in North Philly, in one of the poorest neighborhoods of North Philly. So I've never been in a neighborhood where I'm flooded by everything. Like, it's in your face. You would normally see so many families and so many people out you know, going to buy food together or going to these restaurants together. And it looks completely different now. Like these neighborhoods that I grew up in, it was hard. We basically survived sharing everything, like everything. um and now as an adult and trying to offer my kids better than the struggle than what I've known than what I've known, it's a lot lonelier, it's a lot harder. The community, the unity that I received growing up from the community, um just isn't there anymore. The support system just isn't there anymore. A lot of these programs that helped me support my children when I couldn't, I no longer qualify for. So if I am struggling, then, you know, it's just something that I have to deal with and continue to just try to make better. But there's millions of people who are still where I started, or who are going through the same thing that I'm going through, and can't access these programs, or have access to these programs but don't qualify, or their income just this month works and next month it doesn't work, and are constantly going through this fluctuating cycle. um, and while the whole time that your income and your eligibility goes up and down, like, it doesn't change how you feel about yourself. Whether one month you qualify and the next 3 months you don't, you still always feel like crap and feel less than, and feel like no matter how hard you try, things are never going to change, and um, feel categorized and marginalized, and these type of things do stay with you. It's like, it feels like people can see it when you walk in a room. They know you're different. They know that you grew up different than them, or they expect you not to be as smart as they are. Um, I struggle still wondering if, like, the troubles that I've had that have developed more as an adult with, like, my lack of focus and things like that, like how much of that is contributed to what went through as a child, my access to food while I was pregnant, you know, as an adult when I've had to choose between feeding myself and feeding my children. So um I can talk to you guys a lot about what it feels like to be hungry, because that's my experience. I can also talk a lot about what I did to turn my story into action. And thanks to Mariana, you know, I never knew that was possible. I knew that there were problems with the system. I knew that I was complaining all the time, but I didn't know that I was worth listening to. I didn't know that people cared to know what it felt like to be poor, and that that poor voice can actually make changes. So I'll forever be grateful, and you know, any opportunity that I have, Mariana, to have, you know, these type of conversations or to be a part of them, absolutely. Because the way that you've made, I always do this. The way that you've made me believe in myself has carried on to the woman that I am today. And it all started because you just listened to the fact that I couldn't provide for my children, and you didn't judge me. You did everything you can, not only to help my situation, but to help me become stronger and more educated so that I can fight not only for my children and for myself, but for other people. And because of that, I've dedicated my life ever since to raising awareness on food insecurity so that no one has to know what this feels like. I'm 33 and I still deal with the shame of having to talk about these things and having to have my life used as some sort of model or something that people can look at to say, like, oh, look at her. But like, it's 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 something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And hopefully, you know, these type of conversations will help people that maybe don't know about it or haven't gone through it, to see that when decisions are being made about cutting funding to programs or closing down you know, food pantries and things of that nature, that they can look at conversations like this and people like me and see that these are lives that are being impacted by these decisions. Thanks.
Barbie, thank you so much. And so beautiful to see you here. You're an inspiration, and it's really, you have done so much for the country, really, and your advocacy. So thank you very much for all that you do. What else? Other insights?
I think that one thing that I grapple with and like sort of question on is, you know, within Drexel, even we have so many people that I know are dealing with this, but somehow that feels like not everyone, but a majority of the university is like, no, you can afford to come here, so you're not having issues getting food, you're not dealing with any of these sorts of things. And I guess, yeah, I don't know where to go with that, essentially.
Yeah, that's rough. It's there. I'd like to introduce you to the Hope Center at Temple University. Sarah Goldrick Robb. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but when I get a moment, I'll try to put another link. The food insecurity across college campuses is outrageous, and there really is no university that doesn't have some students that are food insecure. It's extremely high, of course, among people who are going to community colleges and public institutions, but I understand that it is happening in Drexel. And I think last year there may have been a survey out, which I have not seen the results to. I haven't really been involved in that, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. But there's a lot of advocacy that can be done for college students, and probably one of the biggest things that might happen, I'd say in the next 2 or 3 years, is to make sure that college students can get SNAP benefits. Number one. Better yet, how about free tuition? Hey, why should you have to pay colleges tuition and then go get on food stamps or SNAP benefits? But there are also people talking about doing like meal programs for students who are in college. So I know it's a real struggle, and I'm saddened to hear that Drexel is no different than other campuses, and there are more things that we can do. I have some ideas. Actually, in the Google Doc that I gave you all a link to, there's a chapter in there it's called Food Insecurity and Public Health. Click on that and download it. At the end of that, I have some things for college students. And if you don't do those click on those 2 chapters, they might disappear because I uploaded them onto my ResearchGate page illegally. But I wanted to make them available to you all.
I had a quick question. What can we do to better advocate for policy change? Is there anything right now in the House or Senate that you can think of that we can call on our representatives and urge them to go through with?
Well, right now we are at the threat of we are like watching a coup in slow motion with the Trump administration refusing to acknowledge that Biden just won the election fair and square. So that's a big problem. And Senator Toomey, who is one of your senators in Pennsylvania, has not come out and congratulated Biden and is supporting President Trump, and has been a wuss, frankly, his entire time in office. There used to be a Tuesdays with Toomey. I don't think that's happening anymore, but some of the members of Witnesses to Hunger used to go outside of his office and give speeches. Toomey has been a disappeared legislator, and I wish you all the best in trying to contact him. They never answer the phone there. And maybe someone will pass on this recording and get it to Toomey, and I'll get in trouble at Drexel for calling out Toomey, but at least Toomey would have heard that Toomey needs to get out of office fast and immediately make sure that there is a smooth transition for a new president where we can actually talk about SNAP benefits with a reasoned and rational approach. For instance, the whole thing with President Trump and the food boxes during COVID was a travesty. I know some people appreciated those boxes, but the fact that Trump wanted to have a little flyer in those food boxes was really unacceptable. Wrong. Yeah, Barbie's like, no. So that's the first thing you can do. And so I think starting in January, really start to get more familiar with what's going on with the Farm Bill and the Child Nutrition Reauthorization. Child Nutrition Reauthorization is really important for the Women, Infants, and Children program. 50% of the children that are born in the U.S. are born into poverty and are eligible for the WIC program, and that funding, that program should really be there. That's a really good public health program.
Thank you.
I think another sort of question I have is grappling with like short-term versus long-term. So like long-term, systematic change, 100%. But how do you balance, people who need, access right now with pushing for that long-term change?
Yeah, sometimes you just can't advocate if you're hungry, if you don't know where your meal is coming from, if you got kids to feed. If you're not struggling with food insecurity and hunger, what you can do is join in on mutual aid groups. There's a mutual aid group in West Philly. I'm not sure if anybody maybe participates in that, Bunny Hop. But there are other mutual aids groups, and I put in Philly We Rise in my little Google Doc, and you can find out the mutual aid organizations. You can give money that gets give money or food that gets into the hands of people who need it right in that moment, in a way that is mutual aid oriented, and that deals with the immediacy. Most important is to develop relationships across race and class, where you have a social circle, because if you don't have enough money for food, but if you have a friend you can show up to and say, hey, can we have dinner together or something like that? If you have a good friend, they will feed you. So you need lots of friends in a network. But I'm sure other people on this call may actually have better ideas about what to do in the immediate term. Wait, I see you all waiting to speak up, and I'm unafraid of silence. Sorry, you're on mute, I think. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name. Yes.
And now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. I know you said that charity is not a solution, okay? But I'm from Haiti, there's a lot of poverty. And like sometimes just looking at someone's eyes and face, you can see that they are struggling for food and everything. And like you feel powerless and you can't do anything. And the only way you find to help them is like doing it's charity, but I don't know, is it that personal satisfaction for you, but it's the only way you can help them.
I agree. I mean, there are moments where it's immediate. You need to jump into action. You're making up for all of the injustices that are so huge. It's like a huge tidal wave of injustices and generations-long injustice. And there's nothing better than to sit down with someone and share your food, share your money, share your wealth in the immediate. So I agree. There are times when you really just got to just jump into gear and do what you can. It's always better if it's done through friendship and solidarity, long-term relationship, not transactional, and never bragging about it. But that, me, is like a personal thing. I really have an issue with people who brag about feeding other people.
And doesn't it kind of go to like what was both said about both of you? It's that we do need to act and we do need to help, but it's also about the sustainability of it all. Like that old adage, if you give a person a fish, they can eat for a day. If you teach a person to fish, they can eat forever. And I think that that's really where it comes from. But also that community building, I believe, is critical because it allows people to realize that we are all on the same level. Everybody has to eat. Like you have to, you can't really negate it. And if you choose to negate it, you'll have a lot of things that come from it. But once you realize that we're all locked in step with this thing, it becomes about we instead of me, or even figuring out the ways in which we can really uplift the educational components of food. Because I think a lot of people know about food, but not a lot of people know what goes into the food that we're actually consuming, and trying to give people the best opportunity to actually go through a healthy life. Because I think a lot of people have been fed a lot of misinformation, and we go for what seems to be easy because that's what we may be able to afford. But there's ways in which we can stretch those things out and make things happen, as opposed to waiting for, let's say, the government to really step in. Because I was told when I was younger that nobody's going to save us but us, especially when you're coming from minoritized communities and situations where you're already backs against the wall. So that community building, I think, is critical, especially when it comes from people who you may not even realize care enough for your situation.
Absolutely. And I would just add to that, something that I don't hear spoken about often when it comes to food insecurity is the dignity portion. We talk about wanting to help people and the importance.
Barbie, you muted yourself by mistake, I think.
I'm sorry. And we talk about building these relationships with people, and not being transactional, which is absolutely, absolutely important, because you can share your story a million times and it still won't bring you the dignity that you feel like you deserve. You can tell when people are listening to you with their eyes what perception they're gaining from what you're sharing with them. One of the things that you can't fight for is true morality and dignity and respect, like, because people look at respect so differently, and dignity can be spoken about in so many different ways. But I think that in these conversations, what needs to be mentioned is the support going to these people that are receiving the help, and looking at them in the eye when you're helping them, being truly empathetic, because even if it isn't someone's actual story that they may not relate, um, you can feed them, but you can't give them their dignity as you're helping them. um as I said already, it's something that I still struggle with, trying to find the balance between self-respect and needing validation, or trying to feel like I always have to prove myself a little bit more because I was on welfare and because people already have this certain view of me. So what I would love to hear be a part of these conversations is, how do we make sure that we're treating people who need help with respect, and making sure that they feel like humans and not like they're a charity case, or as Mariana mentioned in the beginning, in November, like, people always reach out to me and want me to be a part of something in November because it is Hunger Action Month, or because um Thanksgiving. So people want to feel like, they're a part of a food drive, or they're giving away turkeys, or they're helping a family have a meal during Thanksgiving, when we have families going through this every single day, who have been here, who are here now, who are going to be here next week, and who have been completely, their situations have been completely made worse by COVID, with accessibility and affordability, which are already things counting against low income communities. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. Other thoughts before we close? It's getting close to the 6 o'clock mark.
I just want to ask really quickly, is it okay if I link that really helpful Google Drive link to our Facebook? Because it has so many great, I was like looking through it and there's so many good links. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, sure. It's not comprehensive, but maybe I'll keep adding to it.
no, it's great. It's
But
great.
it gets people started. I'm totally interested to help people think beyond what's right in front of us now. It's what people think of as easy. Think beyond fill abundance. Think beyond the charity model.
And I also really want to thank everybody. It's not over. We can keep it going, but I think I'm always really amazed when we have these conversations and people get so real about their own experiences because, you know, we've had chai chats where it's just us three and the speaker and, you know, we can't all share our experiences. So I just want to thank everybody who came now before I, you know, let it get away, that your experiences are really helpful. And there's people at Drexel who have never heard of food insecurity, have never lived that life. And to really shed this as a, you know, huge problem that faces everybody. And I just really want to thank you guys because it's, these type of chats just make me so happy because it really does mean a lot.
Thanks. I think what hunger does is it questions our humanity. And to share food with someone is to be human yourself and to recognize the humanity of your friend or the other person. So we have a few minutes left, I think, for others.
Okay, so can you all hear me? My internet is really bad.
Yes,
so
yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Great. Great. So thank you for the information and thank you for sharing all your stories. I really appreciate it. Many ideas come to my mind when it comes to this topic. First of all, I'm an international student, so and I'm from Peru. So my first year moving to the US was such a big struggle because I had to readapt a lot of my diet. Like I'm used to eating vegetables and fruits, and these are kind of things that are around my community here. But when I moved to the US, it was just like, okay, now I want to buy all this stuff that I'm used to because it's part of my diet, but just happens that it's extremely expensive. So I cannot buy it anymore. And a lot of the money that I had available was only like able to afford either canned food or fast food, which I'm not used to eat any of those. And funny enough is that fast food in Peru and many other developing countries is considered a luxury food. So it's expensive. So like use that idea, it's always in the back. And I also remember in my first year, me and other students would just only go to student events for the food. So like, yeah, we enjoy the information, but we'll just be there like, oh, bet you have food. But like, it's something that is always there. And definitely thinking about community building is important. And I think that that's what has really changed and like had an impact on my life because I really like cooking. So I find out that I have friends who also like cooking. So we'll just like set up a meeting or like say when they're available or use whatever I'm doing, try to do a little bit more portion so that I can share it and they will do the same another time. So that thing that I was so.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, the American food system is rife with big problems. So sorry it's a struggle to find good food here, but it's beautiful to hear you cooking and sharing with friends. We have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn from you. So I think I'm done. I'll turn it back over to Maurice and Zach and Rowan.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Rowan and Zach, but I will just say thank you seriously for everybody who chose to come out today. These types of topics are near and dear to our hearts, but we do them because it directly impacts the Drexel community, whether they realize it or not. And having this conversation, providing the resources that you did, finally meeting you in person. We've been on communications randomly. Well, I guess not in person, but it's something that I think continues the conversation. You know, too often people would only talk about these things that happen every single day when a tragedy strikes. You know, like if something was to happen on campus as it relates to food insecurity and it was a tragedy, then we'll be like, let's figure this out and let's solve it. But if we don't actually do the groundwork before that, it's all for naught. It's not real success. It's not a real progressive idea. And I just want to say these types of things remind us why we actually do the work, because it's hard. You know, it's not easy. Talking about inclusion work and trying to make it happen it's a struggle. It's a process, especially when people don't really get behind it, even when it seems to be easy to get behind it. So thank you again. And I'll throw it to Rowan or Zach.
I'm muted, sorry. So we do have an Instagram page this term. It's just, I always show it and it never shows because the cameras don't work like that. But it's just Drexel Chai Chats. We're also on Facebook, and we like to post like chai chat takeaways after our chats. So if you might have missed something in the chat, we like to take notable quotes, and we'll post all those links, those really helpful links to all the everything. So we'll post that in our Instagram bio too. So our next chai chat, I believe Zach has the exact date, but what was that, Zach?
I believe it's December 1st.
December 1st. It's on homelessness and displacement. So all very relevant again. So if you can make that, we would love to have you. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I think you covered basically everything that I was going to, Marie. So am I missing anything?
All good. Thank you all again for coming, and